Before we get into the substance, let me say this directly to you as a fellow history obsessive. If you value deep evidence-based knowledge that goes beyond surface-level survival myths, subscribe to Atten Recounts right now. This channel exists for people who care about how real humans actually survived real crises. Today's topic is exactly that. Not fantasy prepping, not modern marketing hype, but crops that sustained entire civilizations through famine, climate swings, and displacement. Stay with me for the next minute, because what you are about to hear reshapes how we think about food security altogether. When modern systems fail, they fail fast. Supply chains collapse, monocultures die off, and calorie-dense industrial food becomes inaccessible. Native American societies understood this fragility centuries ago. They did not rely on single crops or ideal conditions. They built resilient food systems designed for drought, cold, poor soils, and human conflict. These crops were not chosen by accident. They were selected through generations of trial, failure, and survival. If you are serious about understanding sustainable survival, this is where the real lessons are. This guide begins with the three sisters because they were the foundation of survival agriculture. Corn, beans, and squash were not simply planted together for convenience. Corn provided vertical structure, beans fixed nitrogen into depleted soil, and squash suppressed weeds while retaining moisture. In practical terms today, you can replicate this system in a small garden bed, or even a rural plot with poor soil. Plant corn first, wait until it reaches knee height, then add climbing beans at the base and squash around the perimeter. You are not just growing food, you are recreating a self-supporting agricultural system that reduces fertilizer needs and water loss. Amaranth was grown because it fed people when other grains failed. Amaranth thrives in heat, tolerates drought, and produces both edible leaves and protein-rich seeds. The Aztecs relied on it heavily, and it remains one of the most nutritionally dense plants known. In a survival context, amaranth is invaluable because it matures quickly and grows in poor soil. You can harvest young leaves within weeks and seeds later in the season, ensuring continuous food availability from a single planting. Jerusalem artichoke mattered because it stored calories underground, where war and frost could not reach them. This tuber, native to North America, grows aggressively and survives winters that kill most crops. Indigenous communities relied on it as a famine food. Today, planting Jerusalem artichoke along a property edge creates a near-permanent calorie reserve. Even if above-ground crops fail, the tubers remain edible and hidden. Sunflowers were cultivated because they offered oil, protein, and morale in one plant. Native tribes use sunflower seeds for fat, which is critical in cold climates and during food scarcity. Practically speaking, even a small sunflower patch can provide cooking oil through simple seed pressing or roasting. In survival terms, fats are often the first thing lost in emergency diets, making this crop unusually important. Beans extended survival because they could be dried, stored, and traded. Indigenous varieties like tepary beans were specifically adapted to desert conditions. Tepary beans require minimal water and still produce high yields. Growing them today is a direct hedge against drought. Once dried, they store for years, offering long-term protein security. Squash and pumpkins mattered because they stored through winter without refrigeration. Hard-skinned squash varieties were cured and stored for months. In practical use, growing winter squash gives you a shelf-stable food source that requires no energy input after harvest. This was critical for tribes facing long winters or unpredictable hunting seasons. Wild rice was not a luxury food, it was a strategic survival crop. Native peoples of the Great Lakes region harvested wild rice because it regenerated naturally and resisted pests. While modern cultivation is more controlled, even small-scale wetland planting can yield a renewable grain source that thrives without ploughing or fertilizers. Chia and goosefoot were grown because small seeds can save lives. Chia provided energy, hydration and nutrients in compact form. Goosefoot, a relative of quinoa, grew wild and required little care. These crops are ideal today for small spaces and quick harvest cycles, especially in urban or marginal environments. Tobacco, while not food, played a survival role through trade and diplomacy. It functioned as currency and social glue. This matters historically because survival is not just calories, it is alliances. Understanding this reminds modern survivalists that barter crops can be as valuable as edible ones. Blue corn existed because diversity prevents catastrophe. Unlike modern hybrid corn, indigenous corn varieties were genetically diverse, reducing total crop failure. Growing heirloom corn today preserves this resilience and avoids dependence on fragile hybrids. Groundnuts and prairie turnips mattered because they thrived where nothing else would. These root crops grew in poor soils and harsh climates. Learning to identify and cultivate similar native roots today expands your survival food options beyond traditional gardens. Berries like elderberry and serviceberry were, survival medicine disguised as food. They provided vitamins, immune support and, preservation through drying. A survival garden without medicinal nutrition is incomplete, and Native Americans understood this intimately. Cattails were used because entire ecosystems can, in fact, be food sources. Roots, shoots, and pollen were all edible. Growing near water sources today offers both food and filtration benefits. Native peppers were cultivated because, honestly, preservation matters as much as production. Capsaicin deterred pests and preserved food. Drying peppers today gives you both flavor and antimicrobial benefits. The final lesson is that survival crops were chosen for systems, not just convenience. Native American agriculture was never about yield alone. It was about resilience, storage, nutrition, and really adaptability. Applying this knowledge today means planting diversity, prioritizing storage crops, and thinking in seasons, not weeks. If this guide expanded how you think about survival, history and food systems, subscribe to Atten Recounts. Share this with someone who still thinks survival starts with gadgets instead of agriculture. These crops fed nations through collapse. They can still feed us if we are willing to learn.